The operating room lights blazed down on Robert Mitchell's weathered face as Dr. Jonathan Hayes positioned the scalpel above the dark mass spreading across the veteran's right cheek. His hand trembled. Something wasn't right. A scar, jagged and pierced, running along the old man's forearm. Hayes froze. His father's last letter had described that exact mark. The shrapnel wound, the burning jungle, February 12th night. "Doctor," the surgical nurse prompted, "we need to proceed." Hayes couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His mind catapulted backward through 56 years of wondering, of grieving, of asking why his father never came home from Vietnam. The man lying unconscious before him, this dying stranger with stage 3 melanoma eating through his face, wasn't a stranger at all. He was the soldier who'd tried to save Sergeant William Hayes during the Tet Offensive. The one his mother spoke about in whispers. The one who'd pulled his father's body from the flames while taking shrapnel meant for someone else. The one who'd survived when his father hadn't. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Word count 506 months earlier, Robert Mitchell woke at 5 in the morning as he had every day for 40 years. The house on Maple Street in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, sat dark and quiet. He didn't turn on the lights. Electricity cost money. In the kitchen, he cracked a single egg into a pan beside one slice of bread. The refrigerator hummed behind him, nearly empty, except for a bottle of ketchup, a box of baking soda, and 2 more eggs. He ate standing at the counter, washing down the meal with black coffee from yesterday's grounds. The dining table still had 2 place settings. Martha's chair collected dust. He couldn't bring himself to put it away. "Morning, sweetheart," he whispered to the photograph on the wall. Martha smiled back at him from 1985, her arms around their 5-year-old son, David. "Another day without you," as he touched the frame gently before shuffling to the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at him bore the map of 68 hard years. Crow's feet, sun damage, and there, on his right cheek, a small dark spot he'd been ignoring for months. Just a pimple, he told himself. Nothing to worry about. Robert's mind drifted backward, as it often did these days. Vietnam. He'd been 22 years old, a Marine with the 3rd Battalion, Tet Offensive. The ancient city of Hue had burned around them while they fought block by bloody block. His best friend had been Sergeant William Hayes, 28 years old, married, a baby boy named Jonathan waiting back home in Philadelphia. William had kept a photograph in his helmet, his wife cradling their infant son. "We look after each other, Mitchell," William used to say. "That's what brothers do." February 12th. The ambush came at dawn. Robert remembered the crack of gunfire, the screaming, William shoving him sideways. The bullet that should have killed Robert tore through William's chest instead. Robert had held him while he died. "Take care of my boy." William had gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "Jonathan, tell him." But death took the rest of the words. 56 years later, Robert still felt the weight of William's body in his arms, still heard the rattle of that final breath. Survivor's guilt, the VA doctors called it. Robert called it a debt he could never repay. He'd come home in 1960, married Martha in 1972. Their son David was born in 1980, and Robert had worked himself half to death as a mechanic for 35 years. Hard labor felt like penance, like punishment for being the one who survived. Martha had made life bearable. Sweet Martha, with her gentle hands and patient smile. But cancer took her 3 years ago, and David had moved to California long before that. The phone calls grew shorter. The visits stopped entirely. Now, Robert lived alone in a house that felt too big and too empty. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. The grass in the yard grew wild. Paint peeled from the window frames. He was 68 years old, and he'd never felt more tired at night. He talked to Martha's photograph. During the day, he counted pennies and skipped meals. The small dark spot on his cheek grew larger. Robert Mitchell didn't know it yet, but time was running out. Word, count 800 March, brought thawing snow and the first crocuses pushing through the dead grass in Robert's yard. It also brought the spot on his face. Ickled. He'd first noticed it in January, a small bump on his right cheek, no bigger than a pencil eraser, dark, slightly raised. He'd touched it once, felt its rough texture, then dismissed it. Just a pimple. I ain't getting any younger. By March, it had doubled in size. The color deepened from brown to nearly black. When he shaved, the razor caught its edge and made it bleed. Robert pressed tissue paper against it until the bleeding stopped, then avoided looking at mirrors for the rest of the day. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned it when he collected his mail. She was 75, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Robert, that spot on your face looks nasty," she said, leaning on her cane. "You should get that checked." "It's nothing," he muttered, turning away. But it wasn't nothing. Deep down, he knew. The spot itched. Sometimes it hurt. At night, lying in bed, he'd touch it gently and feel his heart rate quicken with something that felt like fear. He waited another month before making an appointment. Dr. Sarah Coleman had been his physician for 15 years. She was 52, efficient, and didn't waste time on pleasantries. When Robert sat in the examination room and she studied his face, her expression shifted from professional to concerned. "How long have you had this, Mr. Mitchell?" "Couple months." "It's nothing." She pulled on latex gloves and leaned closer, tilting his face toward the light. Her fingers probed the edges of the lesion. Robert watched her eyes narrow. "This isn't nothing," she said quietly. "I need to do a biopsy." "A what?" "A tissue sample. We'll send it to pathology." She rolled her stool back and pulled out a form. "Mr. Mitchell, this could be melanoma." The word hung in the air between them like smoke. "Melanoma?" Robert repeated. "That's skin cancer." "Yes." "Nah, Doc, I've seen worse. Back in Nam, we had guys with—" "Mr. Mitchell." Coleman's voice cut through his deflection. "This is serious. Melanoma kills. If that's what this is, we need to move fast." Robert's throat went dry. He thought about Martha, about how the cancer had eaten through her from the inside, about the hospitals and the treatments that didn't work, and the way she'd looked at the end hollow and gray and not like Martha at all. "What if I don't do the biopsy?" Coleman met his eyes. "Then you'll die, wondering what might have saved you." He let her numb the area with a needle that stung worse than he'd expected. She used a small blade to cut away a piece of the lesion. Blood trickled down his cheek. She pressed gauze against it and told him to hold pressure for 10 minutes. "Results in 7 to 10 days," she said. I'll call you." 10 days felt like 10 years. Robert went home and sat in the dark. He didn't call David. What would he say? Your old man might have cancer. Come visit. No. David had his own life in California, his own problems. Robert wouldn't burden him with this. The nightmares started on the third night. In them, he saw himself lying in a coffin. David stood at the graveside, but his face was turned away. Jennifer, David's wife, stood beside him, her hand on his arm, whispering something. And David nodded. Then they walked away while Robert screamed from inside the box, unable to make them hear. He woke drenched in sweat, his heart hammering. Martha's side of the bed was empty and cold. He reached out anyway, needing the comfort of her presence, finding only sheets. "It is what it is," he whispered to the darkness. On the 10th day, Dr. Coleman called, "Mr. Mitchell, you need to come in, now." Her office smelled like antiseptic and fear. Robert sat in the same chair he'd sat in 10 days earlier. Coleman had papers in front of her. Her face was grim. "It's melanoma," she said. "Stage 3. It's aggressive." The words seemed to come from very far away. Robert heard them but couldn't quite process their meaning. Stage 3, aggressive. His hands started to shake. "How long do I have?" Coleman leaned forward. "Without treatment, maybe 6 months. With surgery and therapy, we can fight this." 6 months. Robert thought about William Hayes bleeding out in his arms, about Martha's final days, about all the time he'd wasted being alone when he could have been. What happy was that even possible anymore? "What do I need to do?" he asked. Coleman slid a paper across the desk. It was an estimate from the hospital. Robert's eyes found the total at the bottom. $250,000. His pension was $2,700 a month. His savings account held $3,200 money he'd set aside for his own funeral. Robert looked up at Dr. Coleman and saw his death sentence reflected in her sympathetic eyes. "Word! Count 900. Dr. Coleman laid the cost breakdown on the table between them. Robert's eyes scanned the numbers. Each line another nail in his coffin. Surgery to remove the melanoma, $85,000. Chemotherapy, 6 cycles, $120,000. Radiation therapy, 30 sessions, $45,000. Total estimated cost, $250,000. Medicare will cover approximately $98,000, Coleman said quietly. That leaves $152,000 out of pocket. Robert did the math in his head. His monthly income from VA pension and Social Security combined was $2,739. His expenses, property tax, insurance, utilities, medications. Medicare didn't cover. Food left him with maybe $700 a month if he was careful. He'd need to save for 18 years to afford his treatment. He was 68 years old. He didn't have 18 years. "There must be something," he said. "Payment plans. Charity care?" Coleman nodded. "We can apply for assistance programs. And there's the VA. You're a veteran. They should cover this." "Should—" Robert heard the uncertainty in that word. "I'll try the VA," he said. The Veterans Affairs Medical Center sat on the edge of town. A sprawling complex of brick buildings and parking lots. Robert took the bus because his truck had been repossessed 3 months earlier for $800 in missed payments. Inside, the waiting room smelled like floor cleaner an old coffee, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, fluorescent lights humming overhead. A dozen other veterans sat waiting, most of them older than Robert, some missing limbs, others staring at nothing with hollow eyes. Robert took a number and waited 2 hours before his name was called. The claim specialist was maybe 25 years old. Clean-cut, pressed shirt, a nameplate that read, Brandon Matthews. He looked like he'd never missed a meal or worried about a bill in his entire life. "I served 3 years in Vietnam," Robert said, sliding his discharge papers across the desk. "I have stage 3 melanoma. My doctor says it's likely from Agent Orange exposure." Matthews barely glanced at the papers. His fingers flew across his keyboard, clicking through screens. "Your claim is denied." "What, I haven't even filed a claim yet." "You filed in 1998 for Agent Orange benefits. Denied due to insufficient evidence." "That denial stands." "That was 26 years ago. This is new. I have cancer now." Matthew's expression didn't change. "Do you have proof the cancer is service-connected?" "My doctor said medical opinion isn't proof. We need documentation. Service records showing Agent Orange exposure. Your records are—" Matthews clicked through more screens. "Incomplete. Incomplete." Robert's voice rose. Several people in the waiting room looked over. "What does that mean?" "It means your service records from 1960 to 1916 are missing from our system." "Missing? How do they go missing?" Matthews shrugged. "Records get lost. Computer migrations. Fires. It happens. They don't get lost. Someone deleted them." Robert leaned forward, his hands trembling. "I gave this country 3 years of my life. I watched my friends die. I came home with nightmares that never stopped. And now you're telling me I don't have proof I was even there." "Sir, I understand you're upset, but without documentation, I have my discharge papers right there. Those show you served. They don't show Agent Orange exposure." Matthews closed the file on his screen. "Your claim is denied. You can appeal, but I should tell you the approval rate for appeals is less than 15%. Next." Robert stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. His vision swam. The room tilted sideways. His knees buckled, and he grabbed the edge of Matthews' desk to keep from falling. "Sir." Matthews sounded annoyed rather than concerned. "Sir, you need to move along." Robert straightened slowly. His legs shook. Around him, other veterans were standing up, staring at Matthews with expressions of disgust and recognition. They'd all been where Robert was. They all knew this script. An old man in a wheelchair started clapping slowly. Others joined in. Not applause, mockery. A slow clap for Brandon Matthews and his denials, and his clean desk, and his complete ignorance of what any of them had sacrificed. Matthews' face reddened. "That's enough. Security." Robert walked out before security arrived. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, he sat at his kitchen table in the dark with a tin box in front of him. Inside was $3,200 in cash. Every dollar he had in the world. Money he'd saved for his funeral so David wouldn't have to pay for it. Next to the tin box was a photograph. Emma, his granddaughter, 12 years old, blonde pigtails, and a gap-toothed smile. He'd never met her. Jennifer, David's wife, had made sure of that. Robert picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Coleman. "I'm not doing the surgery," he said when she answered. "Mr. Mitchell, you'll die. We all die. Doc, I just can't afford to live. There are other options. Clinical trials, charity programs. No." His voice was firm. "This money is for Emma's college fund, not for an old man who's already lived too long." He hung up before she could argue. Then he pulled out a sheet of lined paper and began to write. "Dear David, I'm sick. The doctors say it's cancer, stage 3. But don't worry about your old man. I've had a good life, longer than I deserved after what happened in Vietnam. I just wanted you to know I love you. I always have. I'm sorry I wasn't a better father. I'm sorry for a lot of things. Take care of Emma. Tell her about her grandma. Tell her Martha was the best person I ever knew. Love, Dad." He folded the letter and put it in an envelope. Wrote David's address on the front. Then he opened the kitchen drawer and placed it inside, next to 46 other letters he'd written over the years, all of them sealed, addressed, stamped, none of them ever mailed. Ew! Word count 200 to Sarah Coleman stared at her phone for 10 minutes before making the call. What she was about to do violated HIPAA regulations. She could lose her license. But Robert Mitchell was going to die, and his son didn't even know. She dialed the number from Robert's emergency contact form. The phone rang 4 times before a man answered, his voice distracted. "This is David Mitchell." "Mr. Mitchell, this is Dr. Sarah Coleman. I'm your father's physician in Harrisburg." Silence. Then, "My father never calls me." Is he dead?" "No, but he has stage 3 melanoma, and he's refusing treatment." Why would he refuse treatment?" Coleman chose her words carefully. "He can't afford it. Medicare won't cover everything. He needs $152,000 out of pocket." She paused. "And I think he doesn't want to burden you." She heard David's sharp intake of breath, background noise, other voices, the sound of a meeting in progress. "How long does he have without treatment?" 6 months, maybe less." "Jesus Christ!" David's voice broke. "I'll be there. I'll figure something out. Mr. Mitchell, your father has made his decision. I'm calling because I think you should know. What you do with that information is up to you." Coleman hung up before he could ask more questions. She'd already said too much. David Mitchell sat frozen in the conference room of his software company in San Jose. Around him, executives discussed quarterly projections. Numbers flashed on screens. Someone asked him a question about market penetration. He stood up abruptly. "I have to go. David, we're in the middle of... My father is dying. I have to go." He left his laptop on the table and walked out. The drive home took 20 minutes. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. Stage 3 melanoma, 6 months, refusing treatment because he couldn't afford it. When had his father gotten old? When had David stopped caring? He pulled into the driveway of his 4-bedroom house in a gated community. Jennifer's Mercedes sat in the garage next to his Tesla. Through the window, he could see her in the kitchen, preparing dinner. David walked in and said without preamble, "My father has cancer, stage 3. He's refusing treatment because he can't afford it." Jennifer looked up from chopping vegetables. She was 42, blonde, athletic from daily yoga classes. She'd made it clear years ago that she had no interest in meeting Robert. So, she said, he made his choice. David stared at her. He's dying. Everyone dies eventually. David, he's my father. Jennifer set down the knife. Her voice was ice. Your father is a reminder of an immoral war. I won't have Emma exposed to that. What are you talking about? Vietnam was a crime against humanity. Your father was part of it. He participated in killing innocent people. I don't want his guilt anywhere near our daughter. David felt like he'd been punched. He's a hero. He saved lives. He has medals. Heroes don't kill. Jennifer crossed her arms. I'm setting boundaries. David, that's what my therapist calls it. Healthy boundaries. You want to go to him? Fine, but don't come back. The words hung in the air between them like a blade. David had spent 8 years navigating Jennifer's opinions, her demands, her need to control every aspect of their lives. He'd accepted it because divorce seemed harder than compliance. He'd let her cut off contact with his father. He'd stopped answering Robert's calls. He'd made excuses. 8 years of choosing comfort over courage. Then I'm not coming back, David said quietly. Jennifer's face flushed red. Excuse me, I'm going to Pennsylvania. I'm taking care of my father, and you can decide if you want to be part of this family or not. She slapped him. The crack echoed through the kitchen. David's cheek stung, but he didn't move. Jennifer grabbed a vase from the counter and hurled it at the wall. Glass exploded across the tile floor. How dare you, after everything I've done for you? Everything you've done to me, David corrected. He turned and walked toward the stairs. If you walk out that door, we're done, Jennifer screamed behind him. David kept walking. In the attic, he found the cardboard box he'd been looking for. It was labeled Dad's Letters in Jennifer's neat handwriting. He'd never seen it before. Inside were 47 envelopes, all addressed to him, all opened. Jennifer had intercepted every letter his father had sent for 8 years. David's hands trembled as he pulled out the first one. The postmark read April 2016, a month after he'd moved to California. Dear David, I know you're busy getting settled in your new life. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. That job sounds wonderful. I hope Jennifer and Emma are doing well. The house is quiet without you all visiting, but I understand. California is far. I miss you. Son, love, Dad. The letters grew more desperate over the years. May 2018. Emma must be 10 now. Does she still like horses? I remember she used to draw pictures of them. I'd love to see her sometime. March 20, your mother passed last Tuesday. Cancer. It was fast at the end, which I suppose is a mercy. The funeral was small. I know you couldn't make it. I understand you're busy. David's eyes blurred. His mother had died 4 years ago, and he never knew, never came to the funeral, never said goodbye. The final letter was dated 3 weeks ago. Dear David, I'm sick. The doctors say it's cancer, stage 3 melanoma. I don't have long. I'm not writing this to make you worry. I've had a good life. Longer than I deserved after Vietnam. Longer than William Hayes got. I just wanted you to know I love you. I always have. Even when you stopped calling. Even when the letters stopped coming back. A father's love doesn't have conditions. I'm sorry I wasn't a better dad. I'm sorry I was so broken after the war. I'm sorry your mother had to carry so much of the weight. Take care of Emma. Tell her about her grandmother Tishkit. Tell her Martha was the best person I ever knew. And David, don't make my mistakes. Don't let work and pride keep you from the people who matter. Life is shorter than you think. I love you. Son, your father David collapsed onto the attic floor. The letters scattered around him. Great, heaving sobs tore through his chest. 47 letters. 8 years of his father reaching out. 8 years of Jennifer hiding them. 8 years of Robert thinking his son had abandoned him. Emma's voice called from downstairs. Dad, are you okay? David wiped his eyes and gathered the letters. He went downstairs and found his 12-year-old daughter standing in the hallway, her eyes wide with concern. Pack a bag, sweetheart, he said gently. We're going on a trip. Where? Pennsylvania, to meet your grandfather. Emma's face lit up. I have a grandfather. David's heart broke a little more. Yes, and we're going to see him right now. David didn't wait for a flight. He loaded Emma into the car at midnight and started driving. 400 miles, 6 hours through the dark. Jennifer stood in the doorway screaming threats, but David didn't look back. As Pennsylvania welcomed him with its rolling hills and farmland, David remembered things he'd buried. His father teaching him to ride a bike on Maple Street, teaching him to fish at the creek, hours spent in the garage learning to fix engines. Robert had been a quiet man, distant sometimes, haunted by things he never talked about. But he'd been there. He'd shown up. He'd loved his son the only way he knew how. And David had repaid him by vanishing for 8 years. I've been a coward, David whispered. It was 2 in the morning. When he pulled up to the house on Maple Street, the porch light was out. Paint peeled from the siding. The lawn was overgrown. David left Emma sleeping in the car and walked up the creaking steps. He knocked. A long silence. That shuffling footsteps. The door opened. Robert stood there in a threadbare robe, looking older and smaller than David remembered. The melanoma on his face was dark and angry, impossible to miss. David. Robert's voice was hoarse with disbelief. What are you? David couldn't speak. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his father, holding him tight like he should have done 8 years ago. I'm sorry, David choked out. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm here now. I'm not leaving again. Robert's arms came up slowly, tentatively, as if he was afraid David might disappear. Then they tightened, and David felt his father's thin shoulders shake with sobs. It's okay, son, Robert whispered. You're here now. That's all that matters. They stood in the doorway holding each other, while the darkness slowly gave way to dawn. Word. Count 100. David Mitchell quit his job over the phone the next morning. His boss threatened lawsuits. David hung up mid-sentence. He had more important things to worry about in daylight. His father's house looked worse than he'd imagined. The front steps sagged. Gutters hung loose. Through the windows, David could see furniture from his childhood covered in dust. Inside, the reality hit harder. David opened the refrigerator and found it nearly empty. A bottle of ketchup, 3 eggs, a box of baking soda turning yellow with age. The freezer contained a single can of frozen orange juice. Concentrate. Dad, David said slowly, what have you been eating? Robert shuffled into the kitchen in his bathrobe. The melanoma looked worse in natural light, a dark mass spreading across his right cheek like spilled ink. I eat fine. This isn't fine. David opened cupboards. A few cans of soup, saltine crackers, instant coffee. How long have you been living like this? A while. Define a while. Robert didn't answer. He sat at the kitchen table where two place settings still waited, one covered in dust. David noticed the light switch. He flicked it. Nothing happened. The power's out, Robert said quietly. For how long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Jesus Christ, Dad! David checked the thermostat. No heat either. It's March. It's still freezing at night. I've got blankets. David opened the mail stacked on the counter. Bill after bill stamped in red. Final notice, past due, collections, the electric company, the gas company, property tax, medical bills from Martha's cancer treatment 3 years ago. He added them up. $22,900 in debt. Why didn't you tell me? David's voice broke. Why didn't you call? Robert looked at his son with teary eyes. You have your own life, your own family. I won't be a burden. You're not a burden. You're my father. Exactly. Which means I'm supposed to take care of you, not the other way around. David sat down across from him. Dad, that's not how this works. When kids grow up, I know how it works. I watched my own mother waste away for 5 years, bedridden, incontinent. She bankrupted us, taking care of her. Robert's hands trembled. I swore I'd never do that to you. So you'd rather die alone in the dark? Robert didn't answer. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She'd slept in the car most of the night. Now she looked around the kitchen with says, Grandpa, she said tentatively. Robert turned. His face transformed, surprise giving way to wonder. Emma? Yeah. She walked forward slowly. Dad said I could finally meet you. Finally? Robert looked at David. Mom didn't want me to, Emma said with the brutal honesty of 12-year-olds. She said you were from a bad war and I shouldn't know you, but Dad says she was wrong. Robert's eyes filled with tears. He held out his arms and Emma walked into them, hugging him carefully as if afraid he might break. I've wanted to meet you for so long, Robert whispered into her hair. I've got a whole drawer full of birthday cards I never got to send. David had to look away. Over the next 3 days, David worked. He paid the electric bill and got the power restored. He bought groceries and filled the refrigerator. He hired contractors to fix the sagging porch and replace the broken gutters. He opened a new bank account and transferred money to cover his father's bills. But the cancer was the real problem. $152,000. David had savings, but not that much. His divorce lawyer alone would cost $40,000. Jennifer was already threatening to take everything. David called the Veterans Affairs office and got Brandon Matthews on the line. I'm calling about Robert Mitchell's denied claim, David said. I need to know why his service records are missing. I can't discuss another person's claim. I'm his son. I have power of attorney. David lied smoothly. Now, tell me why his records disappeared. Matthews sighed. Records from Vietnam get lost. Computer migrations in the 90s. A fire at the record center in St. Louis. It happens. To how many veterans? I don't have those numbers. David spent the next week making calls. Congressional offices, veterans advocacy groups, lawyers who specialized in VA claims. A pattern emerged. Thousands of Vietnam veterans had their records mysteriously disappear, specifically records related to Agent Orange exposure. No records meant no proof. No proof meant no benefits. No benefits meant the VA didn't have to pay billions in compensation. It's a cover-up, David told Robert one evening. They're deleting records on purpose. Robert sat in his recliner, wrapped in a blanket. The melanoma had grown in just 2 weeks. It was spreading down his neck now. "Doesn't matter," Robert said. "I still can't afford treatment. We'll figure something out." The next afternoon, David was searching the house for important documents when he found a small wooden box in the bedroom closet. Inside was a Purple Heart medal, a bronze star, and a faded photograph of 2 young Marines with their arms around each other's shoulders. "That's William," Robert said from the doorway. "William Hayes. He died saving my life." David turned the medal over in his hands. Then something caught his eye. A notation on the back in fresh ink, a price tag, $4,000. His stomach dropped. "Dad, where did you get this?" "What do you mean it's mine?" "No, I mean," David couldn't breathe. "Did you recently buy this?" Robert frowned. "I thought I lost it years ago. Found it in a drawer last week." David sat down on the bed. His hands were shaking. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" "In 2018, I was broke. Jennifer wanted to go to Hawaii. We'd just bought the house, and I'd maxed out 3 credit cards. So he couldn't look at his father. "I stole your Purple Heart. I sold it on eBay for $800. The silence stretched forever. "You sold it," Robert said finally. "Not a question. A statement. I bought it back yesterday. It cost me $4,000. Dad, I'm so—" "You sold it for a vacation." David's face burned with shame. I know there's no excuse. I was selfish and speared and—" Robert walked to the bed and took the medal from David's hands. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he set it aside. "It's just a medal, son," he said quietly. "You being here is worth more than any piece of metal." David started to cry. "I don't deserve you." "None of us deserve what we get. We just try to do better." Robert put his hand on David's shoulder. "You came back. That's what matters." The fundraiser started 3 days later. James Burton, a 70-year-old veteran from the local VF2 post, came to visit. He had heard about Robert's situation through the veteran community grapevine. "We're starting a campaign," Burton announced. "Heroes Never Forgotten. We take care of our own, Mitchell." "I can't accept charity," Dropship protested. "It ain't charity. It's brotherhood. You'd do the same for any of us." Within a week, the fundraiser brought in $45,000 from the local veteran community, donation jars at diners, a benefit dinner at the VFW Hall, small checks from old soldiers who had almost nothing themselves. David checked the campaign account daily, watching it grow. Then on day 10, he checked again and his blood ran cold. The balance showed $12,000. $33,000 had vanished overnight. Word count 1-200. David stared at the bank statement on his laptop screen, certain he'd made a mistake. He refreshed the page. The number didn't change. Campaign balance, $12,347. Yesterday, it had been $45,000. "That can't be right," he muttered. He called the bank. The customer service representative confirmed what the screen showed. A wire transfer had moved $33,000 to an external account the previous evening, Who authorized the transfer? David demanded. The account holder, Gregory Caldwell? David had never heard that name. He called James Burton. Caldwell. Burton's voice went hard. He's the treasurer for Heroes Never Forgotten. Said he was a Marine, served 2 tours. Seemed legit. He just stole $33,000. Burton swore colorfully. I'll meet you at his house in an hour. Gregory Caldwell lived in a newly built subdivision on the nice side of Harrisburg. David pulled up to find a Mercedes-Benz in the driveway with temporary tags. Brand new. Probably $50,000 worth of car. Burton arrived in his old pickup truck, his face red with fury. They knocked on Caldwell's door together. Caldwell answered wearing golf clothes. He was 55, tanned, fit. Everything about him screamed comfort and privilege. Can I help you? He asked. You stole from dying veterans. David said flatly. Caldwell's smile didn't waver. I have no idea what you're talking about. $33,000 from the Heroes Never Forgotten campaign? That money was transferred to cover administrative costs. Perfectly legal. Burton stepped forward. Administrative costs. You bought a Mercedes. Prove it. Caldwell crossed his arms. And if you harass me further, I'll sue you for defamation. Now get off my property. David's hands clenched into fists. Burton grabbed his arm before he could do something stupid. You're going to jail, Burton said quietly. I fought in Vietnam. I know real soldiers when I see them, and you're no soldier. Prove that too. Caldwell shut the door in their faces. Back in the truck, Burton made calls. Within 2 hours, they had confirmation. Gregory Caldwell had never served in the military. His entire veteran identity was fabricated. He'd been running charity scams for years, targeting veteran organizations. David filed a police report. The detective said it would take weeks to investigate, maybe months. Robert didn't have months. September arrived with cooler nights and the melanoma spreading like wildfire. Robert collapsed in the bathroom one morning. David found him on the floor, unconscious, his skin gray and clammy. The ambulance took 10 minutes. The emergency room doctor took one look at Robert's chart, and his face went grave. The cancer has metastasized, but he said, lymph nodes, lungs, without immediate surgery. He has weeks, maybe days. David felt the floor tilt beneath him. But if he has the surgery, there's a chance. Not a good one, but a chance. Robert woke up 3 hours later in a hospital bed. David sat beside him, holding his hand. Emma was in the cafeteria, sent away so she wouldn't see her grandfather like this, diminished, fragile, dying. David. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. I need to tell you something. Save your strength, Dad. No, I need to. Robert coughed, his whole body convulsing. When he caught his breath again, his eyes were wet. I need to tell you about William Hayes, the man in the photograph. Robert nodded. My best friend. February 12th, 1998. We were on patrol outside Hugh. Tet offensive had just started. Everything was chaos. David leaned closer. The ambush came from nowhere. Gunfire everywhere. I heard the crack of the sniper rifle, saw the muzzle flash, and William... Robert's voice broke. William pushed me aside, took the bullet meant for me, right through his chest. Tears ran down Robert's face, mixing with the oxygen cannula under his nose. He died in my arms. Tried to tell me something about his son and about Jonathan, but he didn't get to finish. Robert looked at David. I've lived 56 years with that guilt. I should have died. Not him. He had a baby at home, a wife, a future. Dad, it wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I was the one who suggested that patrol route. I was the one who... Robert dissolved into coughing again. David waited until his father could breathe. What was his son's name again? Jonathan. Jonathan Hayes. Something clicked in David's memory. He pulled out his phone and searched Jonathan Hayes, Pennsylvania, but surgeon. The results loaded. Dr. Jonathan Hayes, M.D., Chief of Surgical Oncology at Philadelphia Memorial Hospital, specializing in melanoma and skin cancer surgery. David's hands started shaking. Dad, he said slowly, William Hayes's son, he's a surgeon. He specializes in melanoma. Robert turned his head. What? He's in Philadelphia. An hour away? David was already dialing. I'm calling him. The phone rang 4 times before a professional voice answered. To Hayes's office. I need to speak to Dr. Hayes. It's urgent. It's about his father. William Hayes, Vietnam. A pause. Hold, please. 2 minutes of elevator music. Then a man's voice, deep and careful. This is Jonathan Hayes. Dr. Hayes. My name is David Mitchell. My father is Robert Mitchell. He served with your father in Vietnam. Silence on the other end, long enough that David thought the connection had dropped. William Hayes was my father, Hayes said finally. I know. My father, he was there when your father died. In Hugh, February 19th. Another silence. When Hayes spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. What's your father's name again? Robert Mitchell. And why are you calling me? My father has stage 3 melanoma. It's metastasized. He's in the hospital now. The doctors say he has days. David's voice cracked. I know this is an impossible ask, but where is he? Harrisburg General. I'll be there in an hour. Dr. Jonathan Hayes arrived 90 minutes later. He was 56 years old, tall, with his father's features softened by age and a life lived in safety rather than war. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent decades saving lives. David met him in the hallway. Dr. Hayes, thank you for coming. Hayes shook his hand. Take me to him. Robert was awake, propped up on pillows. When Hayes walked in, the old veteran's eyes went wide. You look like him, Robert whispered. You look just like William. Hayes approached the bed slowly, studying Robert's face, not just the cancer, but the man himself. Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry. Robert's voice broke immediately. Your father died saving me. I've carried that for 56 years. I'm so sorry. Hayes pulled a chair close and sat down. He took Robert's hand in both of his. I know what happened, Hayes said gently. My mother told me everything. How you tried to pull my father to safety. How you took shrapnel trying to shield him. How you carried his body back to base when everyone else said to leave him. Robert shook his head. I failed him. No. Hayes's voice was firm. My father made a choice. He pushed you out of the way because that's who he was. A man who protected others. Hayes paused. I've spent my whole life wondering about the man my father thought was worth saving. What kind of person inspired that sacrifice? He gestured to the room, to David standing in the corner, to the photographs of Emma that David had brought. "Now I know," Hayes said. "A man who raised a good son, a man who kept fighting even when the world forgot him, a man who survived and built a life and loved people." Hayes opened his briefcase and pulled out Robert's medical file. Somehow he'd already obtained it. "This is bad," he said, looking at the scans. "Very bad. The cancer is aggressive, and it's spread." But David moved closer. Hayes looked at Robert. "But I can save you. The surgery will be complicated. We've done 7, maybe 8 hours. The recovery will be brutal, but I've done this before. I can do it again. I can't afford—" Robert started. "I'll do it pro bono." Hayes interrupted. "No charge. The hospital won't—" "Let me worry about the hospital." Hayes's jaw set in a way that reminded David of old photographs of Marines. "If they fire me, so be it. But I'm doing this surgery." Robert stared at him. "Why would you do this for me?" Hayes smiled, and for a moment David saw the ghost of William Hayes in his son's face. "Because you gave me a father's legacy," Hayes said. "Stories my mother told me, letters he wrote, the knowledge that he died doing something brave and good. Now let me give you a son's gratitude." He stood and extended his hand. Robert shook it, tears streaming down his face. "I'll have you in surgery tomorrow," Hayes said. "And Mr. Mitchell, my father didn't save you so you could give up now. So don't you dare die on me." Word. Count 100. David Mitchell's phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. Local news stations, national outlets, social media managers. The story had gone viral overnight. James Burton had posted about Robert's situation on Facebook, a simple plea for help with a photograph of Robert in his Marine uniform from 1908. By morning, it had been shared 40,000 times. Veteran denied cancer treatment by VA trending on Twitter. The hashtag #HeroesDeserve better spread across the country. The fundraiser exploded. Donations poured in from every state. $10 from a retired teacher in Ohio, $500 from a tech executive in Seattle, $20 from a widow in Maine whose husband had died in Vietnam. The veteran community rallied. VFW posts across the country held emergency fundraisers. Motorcycle clubs organized rides. High school students ran car washes. In 72 hours, the campaign raised $120,000. Combined with what Burton's group had already collected, minus Caldwell's theft, the total reached $198,000. Enough. Finally enough. David stood in the hospital parking lot and cried. October 14th, surgery day. Robert was prepped at 5 in the morning. They'd shaved the right side of his head, where the cancer had spread beneath the skin. The melanoma covered nearly a quarter of his face now, blackened, angry, and eating him alive. Dr. Jonathan Hayes scrubbed in at 6. His surgical team assembled around him: nurses, anesthesiologists, oncology specialists. They'd been briefed. This wasn't just a surgery, it was a mission. David and Emma waited in the surgical waiting room. Time moved like cold honey. In the operating room, Hayes stood over Robert's sedated body. The anesthesia had taken hold. Robert's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, kept alive by machines, while Hayes prepared to cut away the cancer, trying to kill him. Hayes positioned the scalpel. His hand hovered over Robert's face. Then he saw it, a scar on Robert's left forearm, jagged, old, the kind of scar that came from shrapnel tearing through flesh. Hayes's hand began to tremble. His mother's voice echoed in his memory from 30 years ago, when he'd asked about the man who'd tried to save his father. "He had a scar on his arm," she'd said, reading from a letter William had sent home weeks before he died, from a grenade. He threw himself over it to protect 3 other men. It didn't go off, but a piece of metal sliced his arm open. 20 stitches. He never complained once. Hayes set down the scalpel. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Doctor," the surgical nurse said, "are you all right?" Hayes touched the scar gently. It matched perfectly. The location, the shape, everything his mother had described. "Mr. Mitchell," Hayes said softly, though Robert couldn't hear him, "how did you get this scar?" Robert's lip moved slightly. The sedation was light enough that he could respond to simple questions. "Grenade," Robert murmured. "68. Tried to shield." His voice faded. "Shield who?" Hayes leaned closer. "William?" "My friend, William Hayes." The operating room went silent. Every member of the surgical team watched as Dr. Hayes stepped back from the table. His eyes filled with tears. "Doctor," the nurse said again, concerned now. Hayes wiped his face with the back of his gloved hand. He'd spent 56 years wondering about the man his father had died for. He'd built an entire career around saving lives, driven by the knowledge that his father had given his life to save someone else. And now that someone lay on his operating table, "You tried to save him," Hayes whispered. "All these years, I thought you were just the man he died for. But you tried to save him, too." The anesthesiologist checked his monitors. "Doctor, we need to proceed." Hayes pulled himself together. He picked up the scalpel again, and this time his hand was steady. "Let's save this hero," he said. The surgery took 7 hours and 43 minutes. While Robert was still in surgery, Hayes had tissue samples sent to pathology for advanced analysis. The melanoma cells showed unusual characteristics, aggressive growth patterns, genetic mutations that didn't match typical melanoma profiles. Hayes called in a specialist, Miriam Chen, who'd spent 20 years studying cancer in Vietnam veterans. Chen examined the samples under electron microscopy. She ran genetic sequencing, cross-referenced the results with databases of chemical exposure cases. When she called Hayes with the results, her voice was grim. "This isn't ordinary melanoma," she said. "The cellular mutations are consistent with dioxin exposure, TSDD specifically. This is Agent Orange-related cancer." Hayes felt rage burn through his exhaustion. "You're certain?" "Absolutely. I've seen this pattern in hundreds of Vietnam veterans. The VA knows about it. They've known for decades." Hayes called David immediately. "Your father's cancer is from Agent Orange," Hayes said without preamble. "Chemical exposure during the war. The VA knew. That's why they deleted his records, to avoid paying compensation." David's voice went cold. "How many others?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Then we're going to make them pay." David spent the next week making calls while Robert recovered in intensive care. He contacted Congressman Richard Morrison, whose father had served in Vietnam. Morrison promised a full investigation. David called the Associated Press, the Washington Post. Done 60 minutes. The story broke nationally 3 days later. VA systematically deleted records to deny Agent Orange benefits. The scandal exploded. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The VA secretary was called to testify. Internal emails were subpoenaed, showing that officials had knowingly purged records of veterans exposed to Agent Orange during Operation Ranch Hand. 12,000 cases. 12,000 veterans who'd been denied benefits because their proof of service had been deliberately erased. The VA tried to deny it, then to minimize it, then to claim it was a computer error. Nobody believed them. Public pressure mounted. Veterans groups protested outside the VA offices. Social media erupted with stories from families who'd lost fathers, husbands, brothers to cancers the VA refused to acknowledge. 3 weeks after Robert's surgery, the VA announced a policy change. They would reopen investigations into all denied Agent Orange claims from 1960 to 1971. They would provide compensation. They would restore deleted records. The estimated cost, $4.2 billion. David and Hayes founded the Agent Orange Justice Foundation the same week. Its mission to help veterans navigate the claims process and ensure the VA followed through on its promises. Robert woke up on the 4th day after surgery. The ICU was quiet, except for the beeping of monitors. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. David sat in a chair beside the bed, his head resting on the mattress, asleep. Robert's throat hurt from the breathing tube they'd removed hours earlier. His face felt like it was on fire, but he was alive. "David," he whispered. David's head snapped up. "Dad, oh, thank God." He grabbed Robert's hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." "The surgery was successful. Hayes got all the cancer. You're going to be okay." Robert closed his eyes. Relief washed over him so powerfully he thought he might weep. "Where is he, Jonathan?" "He'll be here soon. He's been checking on you every few hours." As if summoned, Hayes walked through the door. He still wore scrubs, dark circles under his eyes from 72 hours of minimal sleep. "Welcome back, Mr. Mitchell," Hayes said with a tired smile. "You gave us a scare, but the surgery was successful." Robert looked at him. This man whose father had died in his arms, who'd spent 7 hours cutting cancer from his face, who'd saved his life. "Thank you, Jonathan," Robert said. "Your father would be proud of you." Hayes's eyes glistened. "He is, and so am I. You tried to save him." "Mr. Mitchell, my mother told me about the scar on your arm, about how you threw yourself over him when you thought the shooting would start again. You didn't just survive, you tried to bring him home." "I failed?" "No." Hayes pulled up a chair. "You did what a brother does, what my father did for you. You looked after each other. That's all any soldier can do." Robert nodded, too exhausted for more words. Hayes checked the monitors, adjusted the IV drip, then squeezed Robert's shoulder gently. "Rest now," he said. "You got a long recovery ahead, but you're going to make it. I promise." Word count 850, 6 weeks after surgery, Robert Mitchell sat in a rocking chair on his newly repaired front porch. The October air carried the smell of fallen leaves. and wood smoke. His face was heavily bandaged, but beneath the gauze, healing tissue had replaced the cancer that had nearly killed him. David brought him coffee every morning, real coffee now, not reheated grounds. The electricity was back on, the refrigerator was full, the house had been cleaned and repaired, the sagging porch replaced with new boards that didn't creak. "You don't have to do this, son," Robert said, as David set the mug on the side table. "I know. I want to." David had quit his job in California. He'd rented an apartment 3 blocks away and spent every day at his father's house, cooking meals, driving to chemotherapy appointments, helping Robert shower when he was too weak to stand alone. In the evenings, they sat together and talked, really talked, about Martha, about Vietnam, about all the years they'd wasted being strangers. Robert was learning what it meant to not be alone. The divorce papers arrived in early November. Jennifer was suing for full custody of Emma, citing David's abandonment of familial responsibilities and unstable living situation. Her lawyer was expensive and aggressive. David's lawyer was better. The custody hearing lasted 3 days. Jennifer's testimony painted David as an absent father who'd chosen his dying father over his own family. David's lawyer presented the 47 hidden letters as evidence of Jennifer's deception and emotional abuse. The judge awarded primary custody to David. "Your daughter needs a father who understands what family means," the judge told him. "You've shown that. Your ex-wife has not." David picked up Emma from school the following Monday. She had 2 suitcases and her entire world packed into the back of his car. "Are we really moving to Pennsylvania?" she asked. "Yes. And you're going to meet your grandfather properly this time." Robert was sitting on the porch when they arrived. He'd traded the hospital gown for actual clothes jeans and a flannel shirt that hung loose on his thin frame. The bandages were smaller now, revealing pink scar tissue across his right cheek and temple. Emma got out of the car slowly, suddenly shy. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. Robert stood up carefully, his legs still unsteady. "Hi, sweetheart." She walked up the porch steps and looked at him, really looked at him. At the scars, at the thinning gray hair, at the hands that trembled slightly from nerve damage. "You look different than I imagined," she said. "I imagine I do. Dad says you're a hero." Robert shook his head. "I'm just an old man, honey." Emma stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. "You're my hero." Yet Robert's arms came around her, and he rested his chin on top of her head. His eyes clearly closed. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than emptiness where his heart should be. "I love you, Emma," he whispered. "I love you too, Grandpa." Gregory Caldwell was arrested on November 8th. Police found evidence of multiple charity scams. He'd stolen from veteran organizations, cancer research funds, and children's hospitals. The total exceeded $200,000. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. The court ordered him to return the $33,000 he'd taken from Heroes Never Forgotten, plus penalties. The money went into Robert's medical fund, though he didn't need it anymore. The VA investigation concluded 2 weeks later. Officials confirmed that 12,000 Vietnam veterans had their service records deliberately purged to avoid paying Agent Orange benefits. The cover-up had lasted 30 years. Congress mandated full compensation. The VA was required to restore all deleted records, approve all pending claims, and provide retroactive benefits dating back to original exposure. Robert Mitchell received formal acknowledgement that his melanoma was service-connected. The VA issued a check for $180,000 in back benefits and ongoing medical coverage. He donated half of it to the Agent Orange Justice Foundation. Thanksgiving arrived with clear skies and the first hard frost of winter. Robert's dining table, which hadn't seated more than one person in 3 years, was extended to its full length. David had bought a white tablecloth. Emma had made paper turkeys in art class and scattered them along the center. The house smelled like roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. Dr. Jonathan Hayes arrived with his wife Lisa and their 2 children, Sarah and Michael. James Burton came with his wife Eleanor. De Coleman brought wine and stories about her most difficult patients, Robert included. They gathered around the table as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Robert sat at the head, flanked by David and Emma. His face still bore the scars of surgery, but his eyes were clear. Hayes stood and raised his glass. "To my father, William Hayes," he said, "who taught me that one life can change another." He looked at Robert, and to Robert Mitchell, who showed me what true heroism means, not dying for your country, but living for your family. Robert lifted his glass with a hand that trembled only slightly. To family, to brotherhood, to second chances. They drank together. After dinner, Robert and Emma sat on the porch swing. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Emma leaned against her grandfather's shoulder. "Grandpa, will you tell me about the war?" Robert looked out at the peaceful street, the neat houses, the families inside them living their quiet lives, lives that men like William Hayes had died to protect. "Someday, honey," he said gently. "Today, let's just enjoy this moment." Emma nodded and settled deeper against him. Robert closed his eyes and let the evening wrap around them both. Somewhere beyond the gathering darkness, he imagined Martha smiling and William Hayes, finally at peace. "I've found my way back," Robert whispered to them both. "I'm finally home." Word count 200. Robert's story reminds us of a truth we often forget in our busy lives. It's never too late to come home. How many of us have let years slip by without calling a parent, visiting a sibling, or telling our children we love them? We get caught up in work, in grudges, in pride. We think there will be time later. But Robert and David almost ran out of time. The beauty of their story isn't just that Robert survived cancer, it's that they found each other again. That David had the courage to choose his father over comfort. That Robert learned to accept help instead of dying alone in the dark. That little Emma got to know her grandfather. Family isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated and sometimes painful. But it's also the place where we're loved despite our failures, where we're welcomed back no matter how long we've been gone, where healing happens when we're brave enough to try. So here's my question for you. Is there someone you need to call today? Someone you've been meaning to visit? And what's stopping you from picking up that phone right now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to reach out before it's too late.